Alexander the Great died on June 11th, 323 BC, at the age of 32, leaving behind an unborn child as his sole heir. Alexander's half-brother Philip III was chosen as a temporary ruler of his empire by the Diadochi, a collective of Alexander's top generals. Alexander always looked after his brother and had him at his side during his conquests of the Middle East and Asia, mostly to keep him out of trouble with his enemies and his mother. Alexander's mother, Olympia, who tried to have him killed when he was a child, well, according to some historians, she was well known to do whatever she could within her powers to make sure her son fulfilled his destiny of becoming the world's greatest leader. Philip III was also mentally challenged, which made him the perfect choice to act as a seat warmer for Alexander's child because he had no real ambitions and was easily controlled. While Philip III would be ruler in name only, the real leader of the empire was the head of the cavalry, Perdiccas, who would act as a regent to the unborn child. If it was a son, he would be named Alexander IV. However, the leader of the infantry, Meleager, wanted Philip to be king outright or Alexander's illegitimate son, Heracles, to lead the empire. Meleager and Perdiccas bumped heads, and he tried to lead an opposition, which was quickly crushed, and Meleager was executed. Cinnae, the half-sister of Alexander, learning about Philip III becoming the new ruler of Macedonia and the empire, traveled to meet him so she could marry off her daughter Eurydice to him so she could try and manipulate the half-wit king. Hearing about Cinnae's marriage plot, Perdiccas sent his brother Alcides to murder her. She was killed, but her daughter eventually married Philip, and she used her charm to win over the soldiers who viewed her as a member of Alexander's royal house. Eurydice manipulated the mentally challenged Philip and tried to get him to receive more power and control over the empire. Due to Philip III being a figurehead ruler and Alexander IV still a child, the empire was divided up into sections that were governed by Alexander the Great's top generals after his death in 323 BC to keep the empire from falling into anarchy and chaos due to no solid plan for a successor. The peace between the generals would only last a year, as trouble would occur in 322 BC as Ptolemy, Antipater, and Antigonus would revolt against Alexander IV's regent, Perdiccas. This would lead to the First War of Alexander's successors, which would last until 320 BC with the death of Perdiccas' brother, Alcestis. But the half-wit Philip was oblivious to all of this, as his wife's foes, Perdiccas and his brother Alcestis, were killed in 320 BC. A temporary regent was named to take over his spot, Eurydice, who ruled for a few months. The Council of Generals, however, named 80-year-old Antipater to oversee the empire, but he died a year later in 319 BC. His son and friend of Alexander the Great, Cassander, was passed over in favor of the older Polyperchon, whom the council felt was wiser and would keep a status quo. Feeling slighted, Cassander would form an alliance with Ptolemy and Antigonus and attack Polyperchon's regime in 318 BC. Eurydice, on the behalf of her husband, Philip III, tried to break away from the region's control in 317 BC when Polyperchon was chased out of Macedonia by Cassander and allied herself and Philip with him. Later that year, in October of 317 BC, Olympias, tired of Eurydice's behind-the-scenes manipulations and feeling that they were both a threat to Alexander IV's future as king, allied herself with the deposed Polyperchon, and their forces, along with the king of Epirus, invaded Macedonia to place Alexander IV in power. When she arrived in Macedonia, the soldiers refused to fight against the mother of Alexander the Great and surrendered. Philip and Eurydice fled the capital but were captured in the outskirts of the city and were brought back into Olympia's custody. On December 25, 317 BC, Philip III was executed to prevent Cassander or any of Olympias' enemies from using the simple-minded fellow as a political pawn. His wife, Eurydice, was forced to commit suicide soon after.